Welcome to the Your Gifts Matter podcast. This podcast is all about guiding, educating, and inspiring individuals around the world to access their true gifts, talents, and abilities. We believe that everybody has a gift to offer to the world, and sometimes you may need help, inspiration, and motivation to bring it to life. And that's what this podcast is all about. Our guests are here to share their story, their journey on how they brought their own gifts to the world, and show you how you can do the same for yourself. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Your Gifts Matter podcast. Really excited to have Kevin Blackburn, who's a dad and men's coach, with us today. Thanks so much for being here, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. I know we've got to know each other a little bit over the last few months and learning a little bit about what you're up to. And so, yeah, I was excited to have this informal conversation, just kind of learn a little bit more about you and ultimately the gifts that you're bringing to the world, which from what I've been learning from you are absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to be able to have you share them with our guests today. Why don't we start off just sharing a little bit about yourself, like where you came from, a little bit about who you are, and then we'll kind of just dive into things as we go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so I grew up northern Minnesota. Grew up in a small farm community, so grew up on a farm and hardworking, mother and father. Mom was hardworking because she stayed home with us three boys, and my dad, worked the farm. So had a lot of that instilled in us at a young age. Um, yeah, fast forward, I went to college, graduated with a criminal justice degree, and started doing juvenile probation. Um, Went in wanting to do that, came out still wanting to do that. Worked with high risk youth right out of college. Um, I always gravitated towards working with youth. Even growing up in our small town church, I was working in the nursery. I was helping out with the church camps with the younger kids. So I always kind of gravitated towards just helping the youth in our community. And then as I was a juvenile probation officer, I worked in schools, did home visits, all that kind of stuff from kids that were truancy kids, so kids that skipped school, all the way to first degree assault kids, weapon charges kids, some that had adult sentences hanging over their heads. So kind of wide range of kids that I worked with, mostly boys. Some girls were on my caseload, but just statistically and numbers wise, it was mostly boys. Um, and then met my wife, and we got married, started having our own kids, and she was working a global job, and we kind of sat down and figured out what our next steps were going to be as parents. And I chose to step away from my career and be a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
And so for the last 17 years, I've been a I call it chief family officer, so
Yeah.
CFO. I keep getting raises along the way.
Nice.
So I've been a
Love that.
stay-at-home dad for about 17 years, doing little things here and there,
Yeah.
starting some small businesses. But that's kind of my progression and my journey. Um, Being a dad is my it was my calling, was my passion, is my calling.
Yeah, I can hear that and from what you were talking about, your path into the helping youth and the that were really struggling in the through the designation you got through school and helping them in the justice side of things and that. So where did that come from? Like, did you come from a big family and you were kind of supporting the siblings in that? Like, where did this desire to help youth come from? If you just kind of step back and just dig a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you ask. Initially, I'm like, well, is it because I'm the youngest of three boys? And I'm like, I don't know. That just meant I was the punching bag of three farm kids. Um, I guess, rewind back to it. The funny thing is I guess it's not funny, but when I look back, it's kind of funny. My oldest brother got into some trouble. So coming from a small farm community, you don't really know what all the careers are that the world has to offer. I mean,
Right.
you have one dentist in town, a smaller hospital, these kind of things, maybe one attorney's office. Maybe one of your friends' dad is maybe a chiropractor. So you don't know what a lot of these jobs are. And my oldest brother got into some legal trouble, and found himself on probation, and his probation officer, this lady was like, she came to the house and she talked to all of us, and this is who I am. This is, what you can expect to, seeing me frequently and all this. And I'm like, man, like I love how I like how she talks. I like how she, carries herself. I like how she, cares about our family, cares about my brother. She's going to help him. And I was like, wow, like what does she do? Like I kind of want to know what that job is. And I found out that she was a juvenile probation officer. And if you want to know how small our town was, actually, when she went to travel, she asked my other brother and I to watch her cat. So we had keys to my oldest brother's probation officer's apartment to
Wow.
feed her cat. When you talk about small town, I guess that is how small of our town actually was.
Yeah.
And just like how she let us in and she openly communicated, and I'm like, man, this is cool. And I saw how she helped my brother, you know, work through, some of the issues that he had and some of the things he was struggling with. And it was tough, because once if you're in a small town and you get in trouble, once you're labeled a troublemaker in a small town, it's hard to really uh, break that, break that label.
How small are we talking? How many people were in the town you're in?
Uh, about 7,000
Yeah.
total
So people
town.
hear things pretty easily when things
Right.
happen, right?
Everybody,
The
yeah,
word
everybody
word
knew
spreads.
everybody, yep. One school, so everybody's in the same school,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what opened me up to it, or kind of like I got to see that firsthand, and how she helped our family and kept us connected during the time, and really helped us work through some of that. And I was like I could see myself doing that, you
And
know.
how old were you when you met her and went to get excited about that?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think she came into our family probably around, I was probably around 10,
Hmm.
I would say.
So 10 years old, you had this like epiphany of what you where you wanted to go. Like that's pretty amazing for a 10-year.
It was kind of funny. And then, time went by then. And then as I remember my senior year in high school, we had a project we had to do, and is, interview somebody in the community. And since then she'd moved on or whatever, but I was like, oh, like I'll go to the courthouse and I'll see who the juvenile probation officer is in this area. And so I shadowed him for 2 days, and he was awesome. And I'm like, ah, see, like it must just be what that job is. Maybe I saw like the very, very like good parts of it at times, because there are some pretty stressful parts, and some, parts that aren't, you know, always awesome and don't always work out the way you hope them to, and stuff like that. But yeah, so I shadowed him, and I mean, he kind of was a mentor of mine through college. And I'd come back and talk to him about different things. And yeah, so it's funny. I always kind of reached out to that, and they were always open and willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, and how was it at 10 years old to see your brother go through this legal challenge? Like how old was he? What was the age difference there?
Yeah, so he was 18. So yeah, he was about 8 years different,
Yeah.
8 years older.
What was
Yeah,
the impact on you?
um, you know, it was kind of different, because just family dynamics. He was 8 years older. My other brother's 2 years older. So you know, the brother 2 years older, we were a lot closer in age. We, grew up playing hockey together. We ended up rooming in college together. And, we weren't best friends all the way through high school, but then, once we hit college age, I mean, we were each other's best friend, and lived together and went to the same college. So my oldest brother he's always a little bit distant already, just because of the age gap. And he was very independent, and he was very kind of doing his own thing and stuff like that. The impact to me was, I wouldn't say it, I wouldn't say it was a terrible like impact to me. I felt I empathized for him, I
Hmm.
just because he wanted to do, made a mistake, but then wanted to do the right thing. But it seemed like every time he started going in the right direction, like, he would just kind of get, people would make a comment and just kind of beat him back down.
Hmm.
So it was kind of difficult to watch, I guess, which also taught me some internal things on, like, man, I really don't like how people treat him. So therefore, I'm going to watch the words that I use. So I mean, I was always pretty observant that way. And when I see something, I'm like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. That doesn't seem right or kind. Or, I would always kind of sit back and kind of think about it and reflect on it and be like, okay, well, that's what I don't want to be. So
So how did you learn
don't be
that?
that.
Who taught you this, with this empathetic side? Because you know, I think more and more men are stepping into that muscle around empathy, but for many years, men were told not to go down that route, right? So how did you learn to, or who taught you how to be empathetic? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the person that did it, I mean, it was my mom. I
Mm.
mean, I was the youngest of three boys, and I really think she wanted to have a girl. So I think like out of the three boys, I'm the one that would cook with her. I would bake.
Okay.
She taught me how to sew. She put me in theater classes. Like I played hockey and stuff. I did the things that like like all of us other boys were doing and stuff. But I also got like, she's like, okay, Kevin, you come here. Like, we're gonna bake today, and I'd be like, cool, hey, to spend time with my mom. That's awesome. You know, so it's kind of funny. I always make that joke, but then I always kind of go back and I'm like, yeah, that's completely the reason that, when my kids rip something, like if they're at a volleyball game or whatever for my daughter and she rips something like in her knee pad, I could sew it up real quick and throw it back out there and we're good to go. And the other dads are looking over like, what in the hell are you doing? Like
How did
what?
you do that?
I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, you don't know how to do that? He's like, I just don't even know why you have that with you. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Me neither.
It's incredible. Yeah. So it sounds like you had that really special relationship with your mom. Quite a closer relationship to your mom, would you say?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And she stayed home. It was funny. She stayed home with us until we went to high school, and then she started working outside of the home
Okay.
at that time.
And how about your relationship with your dad? What was that like?
Yeah, relationship with dad, always good.
Yeah.
I'd say growing up, yeah, it was always good. I mean, he was typical farmer. He was out working before, at the time we were getting up for school, or even before we were out for school. But he always went to our hockey games. He always went to the football game. He always went to the track meet. Not a man of many words. And it's funny, I'll say this to begin with, not a man of many words, not a lot of, like attaboys and good job and, I love yous and stuff like that. I mean, I knew all those things because he showed up and I could see it, in his body language. Um, and then fast forward to, gosh, I think it was when I was in college or just, yeah, in college or just a little bit out of college. He had a heart attack and had a triple bypass surgery. And from that moment on, he was a different father.
Hmm.
And it was, I feel really blessed that I was able to see that, see this, I'm this tough, stoic man, you know, I rule, wait till your father gets home. I rule with kind of an iron fist and, and then see the other side of it, where he's like, I don't have to do that anymore. I never asked him. I never got the chance to ask him like why that change. I mean, I just assumed I understood kind of what that change was. But a lot of hugs, a lot of I love yous, a lot of I'm proud of yous, a lot of stories of games that I remember. And I know he was there, but I got to hear what he was
Hmm.
actually thinking in that game. Like, oh, when you did this, like one of the dads made a comment, and I was like, yeah, that's my boy, and I'm like, well, man, that would have been great to hear that then. It wouldn't have changed many things, but it would have been great to hear
Yeah.
it. Um, yeah, so it was really cool that I got to see that transition before I had kids, which, like I said, I'm pretty observant, and I kind of I kind of break things down when I see different behavior patterns and stuff like that. So when I saw that, I'm like, I got the opportunity to analyze like what kind of dad do I want to be. Um,
Yeah. How did,
I think there's a mixture of both is great. To be that stoic and to be that strong. Carry the family on your back. I think there's such honor and such integrity in that. But I also feel like to be able to sit down and your kids talk to you about something that is bothering them at school, or a friend said this, or boyfriend said they want to go on a break type thing, and still be the parent that can sit there and be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry to hear that, how are you doing, and be able to have that conversation as well.
Yeah, you learned so much from both of your parents. That's so amazing. And like, what was that like for you to have that shift in your dad? Like, what was the impact on you? And how did that change your relationship with him?
Yeah, um yeah it was great because then we got to, and it's funny, you don't learn this until until you lose somebody in your life, right? You don't
Mm.
realize like how often I did talk to him, and how often we did call. Like I'd still be playing. I still play men's league hockey, and on my way home, he stays up late, so I'd call him, and he's like, "So how'd it go?" I was like, "Oh, I'm like, man, like I had so many chances, but I can't bury the puck today for some reason." He's like, "Oh," he's like, "Tell me about him." And so we just sit and talk about it.
Oh, nice.
Um, and then once he passed away, then I'm kind of sitting there, and you don't realize you had those. I'm like, "Oh, I wish I would have spent more time with him. I wish I would have done
Mm.
this. I wish I would have done this." And then I'm driving home from hockey, and I'm like, oh, this is where we talk all the time. Like, this is my, once to twice a week where I just, sit here and talk to him about it, or politics. We
Yeah,
won't get into politics, but man, he loved his
he
politics.
did. Yeah.
But yeah, like once he made that, we communicated more. I felt like I could talk, like I felt like he wanted to hear more of what was happening in my life. He probably did before, maybe didn't know how to express it or share it.
Mhm.
And I think when he had that life scare, he kind of stopped caring what you know if he didn't look like the typical quote unquote man or whatever,
Yeah.
or father figure that he thought he had to be, or that his father was. Which is funny. His father was super kind and loving, just like my dad, but he was very very strong and very traditional.
Right. Yeah. So like, it is interesting when these major life events happen, how it can shift people's perspectives on how to approach life differently. And what a gift for you to have that, uh, you know, more connected relationship with him before his passing, and then now have the gift of being able to decide that how you want to be as a dad based on that. It's so like that is just so profound, and what so many gifts in that to be able to
Yeah,
have that, right? So like it sounds like at 10 you were on this career path, you kind of had this course to go down, and we're having some really good um experiences with like a lot of, and plus it's just from what you're the way you're talking about it, like it just seemed like you had this positivity within you and this empathy that you talked about as well. But where did where did challenges show up along the way, and were there any key struggles that you faced as you got older, that things didn't go as smooth as perhaps you thought, and they were also key learning moments for you as well?
yeah. I look back at my childhood, and man, I was very very blessed to have such a support system around me. I had two older brothers that looked out for me in school. So, I was a smaller kid. I was one of the younger kids in my class. So I was a smaller kid. And, you know, and it's one of those, smaller town things, back in the day type thing you talk about. And it's like, if I went home and said, yeah, so and so was just kind of giving me a hard time, I had two older brothers that would shut that down. Only they can beat me up type thing, right?
Right.
They would shut that down. Um, you know, I, a lot of my challenges, I think, if I look back, if I could identify any, were just from like the side of like athletics, maybe athletics and academics, just being younger and being a boy. Um, just school was maybe didn't come as easy for me. Um, Throughout, it took me, I probably didn't hit my groove until I hit college, my second year of college, I would say. It probably would have done me a huge benefit to hold me back, or just not start me early,
Right.
not start me and make me the youngest one in the class. But the two neighbor kids, or the two kids in the two farms next to us, were around the same age, so we all went to school together. Um, so positives and negatives to both of that. Yeah, and just from the side of athletics, I was always smaller, and so I always had to prove. I felt like, um, and not within my family ever. Never felt like I had to do that. Like I had to prove anything to my dad or to my mom or anything. Um, a lot of it was to prove it to my peers, and I think a lot of it was to prove it to myself. Um, you know, you hear enough times that, oh, you're too small to play hockey. Like once checking starts, you're not going to be as good with the puck. Like, so even when I was doing well, I feel like there was always that like little like, oh, but when this happens, it's not going to work out for you.
And so, who was telling? Was that the coaches? Was that your teammates? Like, who was sending those messages to you?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both.
Oh, yeah.
I think some of the kids that I was competing with for the top team and stuff like that. Um, yeah, and I kind of look at that, and so I always felt like that was always that struggle. I wasn't ever flashy, at hockey. I was always kind of a grinder, and so you know, it just it would like I would say my biggest struggles were always that. And then once, it's kind of funny, once I kind of matured, mentally, physically, I grew into my body. Um, then I played hockey in college. My brother and I played together, and I didn't run into that anymore, which was kind of nice, because they're like, oh, you're not the smallest. There's actually guys smaller than you on the team. So that never came up. And I don't know if there's maybe more stories that I was making up in my head,
Mm.
or, maybe the minimal times that people maybe said it in passing or that I overheard it, that I amplified it into something bigger than it was, just
Right.
because of my, self-talk and all that stuff that we do, to beat ourselves down, even, when we're doing well.
And like, how did you handle that as a teen and getting that negative feedback? Like, from a mental state, like, how did you process that? And was it always that you're able to just eventually shrug it off, or did it really kind of pull you down at times and affect your ability to play or your ability to just be who you really wanted to be?
Um, I always had, like I said, I always had somebody to talk to. I would say initially I would internalize it, I'd process it. A lot of times I would use it for fuel. A lot of times I
Mm.
would, it would actually, a lot of times it'll either break you or it'll make you type thing, right? Like it'll break you and make you want to quit and not do it anymore. Like that never even came. I don't recall that ever even coming up. I can recall being frustrated, but I never recall like, you know what, I don't want to do it anymore. Um, but I recall working harder. I recall shooting pucks in the garage. I recall, you know, stealing the outdoor hockey net when the snow melted, we'd steal it and put it in the garage so they can't take it, and then we can shoot all summer with it, right? Like I recall all these things. So you know, and I and I always had my mom and I always had a great relationship. I was always able to tell her if things were frustrating me that way, and she was really good at kind of listening to it and helping me process it, not giving me the answers, but just kind of just be an ear, you
Yeah,
know.
that's amazing to have that support network there to be able to help you through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because as a teen, sometimes it can be tough to not necessarily know who to go to, but to have that, like, to be able to go to your mom, to be able to go to others in your family, and that, like, did your brothers help you through this too? Like, did you have support there, or did you see them respond in this way that when struggles came up, they just drove harder?
um it's funny. Like I said, my oldest brother, by that time, he was out of the house and
Right.
stuff, so
Yeah.
not he was just that much older. But if I look at my other brother, like we didn't have that type of relationship throughout
Yeah.
childhood
Yeah.
until we went to college, and then the playing field evened out a little bit for us. Like I was able to catch up to him, and
Yeah.
we were equals instead of big brother little brother.
Yeah.
I was always following in his footsteps in a positive way. Like he would make varsity and he would have the successes, and I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. he went out for track his junior, senior year. So I went out for track my junior, senior year, and he
Yeah.
ran the 400 and I wanted to run the 400. Like it just worked out that way. I was like,
He
we're
set the baseline
very
for you.
right. And we were very
Yeah.
similar, but we didn't
Yeah.
know that until we got older. Right.
Yeah.
And it was cool. Then he got to kind of watch me follow in his footprints. And, then he was a huge support. For me, he'd come to like my track meets and stuff like that. And,
Nice.
he was the one that was cheering over everybody else,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that wasn't while we were in high school. That wasn't like that. It would have been cool if we had that, but I was probably a pain in the neck too when I was a kid. So let's call it what it is, right?
There you go. Oh, good to be
Yeah,
able to have that grow into that connection as you both got older, and that's so good, and have him as it sounds like a motivator for you.
right.
Yeah. And this, if we kind of fast forward to your career kind of being transitioning to be more at home and still involved with different businesses, and we'll talk a bit more about your coaching in a bit here, but was there was it like a no-brainer, okay, I'm going to stay home and take care of all the family responsibilities, or did it take a bit of a process to go through to realize that you're going to be at home versus the provider, which is the typical kind of stereotypical role for men that has evolved, more and more over the years, but still is, plays out.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, let's be honest, 17 years ago, I didn't have many peers
Yeah.
when I went to the grocery store or I
Hmm.
went to, you know, we were in Minnesota, like, excuse me, the Mall of America had Toddler Tuesday. So every Tuesday, parents would bring their kids and they'd have huge activities at, that huge mall. And there'd be like 100 kids there. And I'd look around and like literally I might have been the only dad there,
Hmm.
so I didn't have many peers. And it was a strange transition. It was awesome because we both kind of were sitting there when we first started talking about it. And it's like, well, she had a job opportunity kind of come up and it's like, okay, there's a bump in salary for that, but it's probably going to be more demanding. So we were communicating about that. And obviously communication is key, right?
Yeah.
And so I was running through, I was like, well, I'm a probation officer. Like this is what I make. Like I don't have, there's no bonuses, there's no commissions, there's no, sales incentives or any of that kind of stuff. So it is what it is. It's a set salary.
Yeah.
And I don't have, when I'm in court, I cannot just walk out of court. It's either I'm in court or I'm not in court. Um, so we kind of were just sitting there and I was like, well, like, what if I stayed home? Once our second one, once she was pregnant with our second one, I'm like, well, why don't I stay home? And the joke I always made was, I was working juvenile probation. I'm like, why don't I stay home and mess up my own kids instead of mess up everybody else's kids? And we still kind of laugh about that. And it's one of those things like she's like, man, that would be awesome. Do you think you could do that? And I'm like, well, I think we should give it a try. And we didn't know what we were getting into, but it was really amazing because I was able to. She primarily worked from home when she didn't travel. So then we got to have breakfast together. We got to do lunches together. It was a lot easier for, you know, us to have dinners where not both of us are stressed to like, what are we going to have? Who's going to pick it up? Who's going to make it? Oh, now we got bedtime and everybody's exhausted by the end of the night. I was able to take care of a lot of that stuff during the day. Um, Plus, I feel like I got some advantages being the dad that was staying at home because I got to mow the lawn during the day, during the weekday, like on a Tuesday, like morning. I was able to get like oil changes in the car. I know these are very like, quote unquote, like traditional gender role things. However, like these are the things that I was in charge of that I would do on weekends or whatever. But I was able to get all these things done during the week. So then our weekends were just family time. And it was a game changer for us. Um, but it's also on a personal level, I'm not, you lose a little bit of your quote unquote identity, right? I mean, we identify with the career we have a lot of times. I mean, look at the first thing that you say when you meet somebody is like, I'm so and so, I'm so and so. Oh, well, what do you do? That's the easiest like kickoff question to start talking to somebody. I'm like, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And it like, usually record stops like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you're a stay-at-home dad? So you don't work? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, your wife stays at home. Like, do you think she doesn't work? It's one of those like it did. It took me a little while to work out that transition. That was probably the harder the social transition than it was me staying home and like our family dynamic. Our family dynamic, I mean, was seamless and I mean, I think we blew that out of the park. But it's more like that social dynamic, and it's mostly what I had in my head. There we go.
How did you work through that?
Um, yeah, so that's a good question. You know, Part of how I worked through that is it took it took time, and it took me just, I don't know, gaining the confidence in what I'm doing is my job. Um, and also kind of made like a little game out of it. Sometimes I just like to see people's reactions. Once I got comfortable, and I'm like, well, I kind
Yeah.
of like to see people's reactions to it, and I would start to say different things like, oh, I'm the chief family officer. Um, I'm a domestic engineer. I'd throw these different things out there and see how they'd react. But
Awesome.
ultimately, I mean, as I reflect on it, and that's why I'm transitioning into kind of doing what I'm doing now is I'm coaching and helping other dads, be more present with their kids. I mean, I had the luxury to stay at home with my kids, but I even identify a lot of times that I was with them physically, but there's a lot of times I wasn't intentionally present.
Mm.
We have our distractions and all that kind of stuff. So as I kind of reflect back, I'm like, man, I really could use like the group that I created. I modeled it off of pretty much what I really could have used at that time. I could have used a group of men that we can work together and become, find different tools that we can use, different ideas, different, um, situations and stuff like that, like that we can implement into our conversations with our kids to build that, and also build a community of dads that are like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Have you guys ever struggled with, you know, not knowing what to say when people ask me like, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
And it'd been really cool to kind of have a group of other dads and men that I could uh, get some input from and
Yeah.
reach out to and connect with.
What are you seeing the impact of these men that you're helping? What are they getting being able to give back to
It's
themselves and their families?
yeah. The really neat thing is the when I wrote the book, it's 31 days, so each chapter is a topic, and then it gives a challenge on how to implement that topic. Like words matter is the topic, and I tell a time where I used words that I had to apologize for because I got frustrated and I was like, are you serious or something like that? And how the kids hear it and stuff. And then, you know, and then having them kind of do a challenge to challenge them on, I like thinking before they're, saying the words that just jump into their brain and stuff, and reflect on maybe a time where, you maybe said something that you didn't quite mean, or your kids maybe took it a different way, or they heard it differently. And then you have a little reflection side. It's interesting because that was one of the chapters recently. We had our weekly Zoom call, and one of the guys is like, "Man, I did exactly the story that you told in that book." He goes, "I read that morning." He goes, and then like my kid did something. I was like, "Are you serious, dude?" And he goes, and it completely almost like his shoulders went down, and he sagged his head, and he goes, "I'm so sorry." He's like, I ran up to him, I gave him a hug, and I was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that." He goes, seriously, these things like are pretty basic, but we also need those like constant reminders. Like
Yeah.
our words do matter. Our words matter when we talk to other adults.
Yeah.
Now talking to, a 6-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid who doesn't have the social skills to identify is he really, really mad at me? Like does he hate me? Is that anger? I mean, will he ever forgive me? You know, they can't process it as fast and as eloquently as we can.
Exactly. What's the title of your book again?
So it's called The Present Dad: 31 Days to Becoming the Father Your Kids Need.
Nice. It's so important, the present, especially with, all the distractions these days, right? That can,
Oh,
it can take us away from being present. That's such a valuable skill to be able to teach man about.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I look back and I'm like, my dad was at all my hockey games. We didn't have cell phones and stuff then.
Yeah.
So like, even though like he didn't talk to me about the game afterwards or go into great detail, he watched. Like he was present when he was there. Like he
Yeah.
watched every shift. His eyes were there. They weren't on a phone. They
Yeah.
weren't listening to a podcast, watching me play. And I know we try to always kind of like multitask or double dip. You know, I've always been a great multitasker, but now I know I've learned now multitasking just means, you only have 100% of attention. So if you're multitasking, you're splitting that 100% somehow.
Yeah.
And your kids, everyone, your kids do deserve at times 100% of your time.
Yeah. No, for sure. And yeah, and they notice it, right? They could tell that you're not there.
And they
Yeah.
learn it and
Yeah.
they learn their behaviors. So then when they become teenagers and you're sitting at dinner and they pull out their phone and you're like, gosh, can't you guys get off your phone? And it's like, man, you should maybe take a little
Like,
reflection time
yeah.
because that's a learned behavior. They might have learned it from their friends, of course,
Yeah.
but I think we're all pretty guilty at times of that.
Yeah.
I know I am.
For sure. And what I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna like because you had at 10 years old, you had this passion to help young men, and that sounds like it led to helping adults and that. So what's driving you to help these present helping more dads become present? Like what's really um like filling you to be able to do this?
Yeah, and as I've been running these groups, so this first class, we have 15 dads in there, and I'm sitting there, and as I ask different questions, like, what have you taken away from the first week, and you hear their reflections, and you hear their like insightfulness into their reflection, and it's funny, like I know they're walking away, gaining information and gaining skills and knowledge, but I am too. At the same time, like their stories also are stories that I can implement into my life now. I mean, my
Yeah.
daughter's 18, going to go off to college this next year. My son's 16. I'm still a dad.
Yeah.
I'm not out of it yet. Like,
Yeah.
and what I do right now during these couple of years is, right now they're in my house. So they have to spend time with me because they're in my house.
Yeah.
Pretty soon they're going to be out of my house. And now the time I get to spend with them is just the time they choose to
Yes.
spend with me. And
Right.
it's like, so I'm still gaining, I guess what motivates me to do it is I enjoy it
Hmm.
and I'm getting a lot from it,
Yeah.
emotionally still
Yeah,
from
that's
it
amazing.
and learning still. I mean, just constantly learning.
Yeah. And what key gifts do you think you are bringing to these men that you've have been with you along the way in your journey?
Um, you know, I'm hoping that I'm bringing um, a sense of patience, a sense of being very teaching just intentional presence. So be very intentional with your time. Um, and hopefully they can learn either through some of my mistakes. Um, it's a lot of, so we don't have to go through some of the bumps that you don't have to go through every hard time. We can learn from other people's,
Yeah.
challenges or mistakes. The biggest thing that I'm really realizing that people are responding to, um, and actually I'm probably going to make an adjustment in my book is the skill to apologize when you make a mistake as a dad.
Mhm.
Um, Even when the kids are younger, like their response to that, um, it's such a trust building thing, and it's everybody thinks when you apologize you're showing weakness. It's like, well, you're the parent, you shouldn't apologize to your kids, you're
Mm.
the boss. And it's like, man, but we make mistakes.
Yeah,
Like
right.
we don't say like maybe what we were saying was right, but how we said it wasn't.
Yeah.
um, and so having that conversation either the next day and say, you know what, when we were talking about this, like, I really do think like we need to talk about like what time you need to come home. But I'm really sorry for the tone I used, like, and the words I used. I was frustrated. I was tired. I know those aren't excuses, but I'm sorry how I handled it. And I didn't like how I handled it. and I'll try not to handle it like that again. You know, a lot of people or some people think that's a weakness, but man, it shows such strength to be in control of your what you say and how you act. And it doesn't show weakness to the kids. It actually shows strength, and it really builds that trusting bond that's
Yeah.
so important, that you need them to trust you as they get older in their teen years, because they're exposed to a lot more than we were.
Yeah, there's that false belief that that apology is the weakness, and it's not, right? It's you're actually demonstrating that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to um, come back and reset and say and yeah, bring that apology to them and bring the reality that yeah, being a dad, a parent is not a set thing, and the mistakes are going to show up, and to be able to hold ourselves accountable to ourselves and our kids is hugely valuable. Yeah. Um, what's the best way people can find you, Kevin? They want to learn more about your book and the work that you're doing.
Yep. So yeah, I'm on socials. Kevin Blackburn. Kevin Blackburn coaching at gmail.com. You can email me. And then www.kevinblackburncoaching.com is my website. So you can find the book, the program. It's one thing, the book's on Amazon, you can buy, you can self-study it. Or like our second class of dads, like the dad group for the 31-day challenge, starts March 1st.
Okay.
So, yep. So that's still open. Yeah. We have several spots left in that. So yeah, excited to kind of tweak what I've learned here in this first, uh, course and our first class, and kind of make those adjustments for the second class. And each one is just is gonna build on it, and grow and yeah, evolve. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for we're not quite halfway through this first one, so I'm excited to see how it rounds off.
Yeah.
Everybody's still showing up, and
Yeah.
like for their kids, for themselves, and for each other. So it's
That's
been good.
tremendous. That's such a great work that you're doing. And yeah, definitely I'll make sure that your website link and contact information's in the episode notes so that people can, yeah, if they're interested in learning more about your book and that, and also even the March 1st class. That's so amazing, Kevin, that you're bringing this work. And I loved hearing your story, and like at 10 years old to be able to have that focus and drive is just unreal. I don't think I had that when I was that age. And um, that's I just could see, from what you're saying, the empathy in you and the focus and just the knowing of, okay, this is what I'm meant to do, and you're doing it at a whole other level today. So
Awesome.
commend you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
This episode is brought to you by the Amazon best-selling book, Engage, Connect, Grow. 52 lessons to guide individuals, corporate teams to the heart of what truly matters to them. Are you at a point in your life where you're ready to commit to seeing your life challenges differently? Visit Amazon today and obtain your copy of Engage, Connect, Grow.